Part 1. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1. In the majestic heavy rain, Mu Yangling stood in the rain with his comrades in arms. In front of him, the captain was yelling loudly, "You are soldiers. You have studied in university for 4 years, and you have been trained here for another year. This is what you gave me. Grades. I'm so humming ashamed for you." The captain was almost going mad with anger. He took the report card and stuffed it under the eyes of the team members. "Are you embarrassed? Are you embarrassed? Don't you think it's embarrassing to go to the special forces like this? Why don't you take the skin off? Let me go home and farm." Mu Yangling stood at attention in the line. Although the autumn rain was cold, he felt his face was burning, and the hand hanging by his side was clenched. It happened to be seen by the captain, who turned around, and the gunfire was aimed at her instantly. "Mu Yangling, are you not convinced? Report to the captain, they are old special forces. Fart, do you have to discuss your qualifications with the enemy when you go to the battlefield? You are going to perform the mission of life and death. If you are not good, you will lose your head. You tell your enemy that he is 30 and you are 20. Doesn't he fighting with you? It would be better to say that you are women and they are men, so you are naturally inferior to them." Mu Yangling hates people talking about gender, even if the other party is her dear and respected captain. She turned her head, looked at him with anger, and shouted, "Captain, let's fight, let's fight. Captain \U0026 comrades." Pointing at Mu Yangling, the captain was speechless, and finally threw away the report card in his hand, rolled up his sleeves and said, "Come on, come out to me. If I don't peel you off today, I will turn around and follow you surname." Mu Yangling dropped the backpack on his back with a snap and took 3 steps forward to open his posture. The captain only shouted, "Come," and Mu Yangling rushed towards him. The two exchanged 3 moves in an instant. The captain caught Mu Yangling's fist and complained in his heart. Even though it had been a year, he was still not used to Mu Yangling's way of attacking. This little girl has changed too much. When she confronted her, she still dealt with him slowly, like a whirlwind. Today, she only focused on attacking, not on defending. The key is that this girl is still strong, so he can't stand it. What should I do? The onlookers mourned silently for the captain in their hearts. In this exchange competition between the 3 military regions, Mu Yangling won the personal all-around championship, among which Sander ranked first. Not only did he defeat the special captain of his own military region, he also put down the special captain of the neighboring military region. In fact, this time, their team's last score was all dragged down by them, because although they are female men, they are still female after all. Mu Yangling has crossed the boundary between men and women, and has truly become a man. Mu Yangling yelled loudly, flew out with his foot, and suddenly there was a snap, and there was a coquettish call. Mu Yangling only felt pain in his ears, and immediately opened his eyes, looking over with evil spirits. Xu Wanyang held her stomach, frightened he jumped, and then tears welled up in his eyes. He felt distressed and worried, and asked, "Aling, are you having nightmares again? You child, you see that you kicked the pit table that your father just made into pieces again." Mu Yangling turned her neck stiffly, and only then did she see the broken pieces of wood on the pit. She seemed to kick the Kong table as the captain again. Mu Yangling jumped up, put together the broken wood on the Kong, and said subtly, "It's okay, I'll go to the mountain to cut trees later, and just make another table." Xu Wanyang frowned. "What the hell did you dream about in this dream? This is the 5th table, and it was the same when I was young, kicking and kicking when I was still breastfeeding." Xu Wanyang took the underwear for her daughter, and seeing her quickly put on her clothes in a rude manner, she immediately became more worried. How can such a daughter get married in the future? Mu Yangling naturally wouldn't say that she dreamed of the scene where the captain of her previous life taught them a lesson, So she only dared to say it in her heart, and never dared to say it out loud. Mom, where's Dad? Your father has gone to Lichhan, and we have to pay taxes again. Our leather goods have not been sold yet, and we can't pay the money for the time being. He will ask if it can be postponed for 2 days. Xu Wanyang's face was full of worry. I don't make much money this year. I'm afraid there won't be much money left after paying the taxes. I originally wanted to send your brother to a private school. In this case, I'm afraid it will take another year. Mu Yangling frowned. This year's tax is 10% higher than last year's. Why do we have to increase the tax every year? If this continues, we won't even have enough rice to cook. Xu Wanyang sighed. Is there any way? Jin soldiers are always disturbing the side. I heard that the overpayment will be counted as military pay. Fart, Mu Yangling jumped up. Golden soldiers have been harassing the side every year, and we have never seen anyone from our side come out to resist. What kind of military salary do you use? You child, don't say anything out there. Xu Wanyang gave her a reproachful look, but she didn't ask for more, complaining that the words of the court officers and soldiers had become the norm, and her reprimanding her daughter was just a result of her cautious temper. Mu Yangling was dissatisfied with getting dressed, and saw that his younger brother Mu Boan was still sleeping, so he stepped forward and pinched his nose. Xu Wanyang looked at him and hit him with one hand, saying, "Don't mess around, your brother is still young, let me he sleeps a little longer." Mu Yangling curled his lips, drank a bowl of boiling water, picked up his back basket and bow and arrow, and was about to enter the mountain. Xu Wanyang hurriedly helped her stomach and grabbed the mustard cakes on the table and chased them out. Take a pad to pad your stomach, you are still a child. How can you not eat? Mu Yangling glanced at Xu Wanyang's pointed and high belly, hesitated for a moment. Xu Wanyang stuffed the pancake into her hand, touched her head and said, "Silly boy, you are still a child yourself, there is still a child at home. Your father is here, don't worry about it." Mu Yangling smiled stupidly, took the mustache and went to the mountains. She decided to hunt more prey today anyway, and bought more fine rice after selling it. I can't get used to it, and my father loves my mother so much, he doesn't want her to be wronged at all, so even if my father is capable, he will not go up the mountain empty-handed every day. At home, he has to maintain such high living conditions and pay heavy taxes. The money is very little. What's more, my old lady suffered a serious illness 2 years ago, and spent all of the family's savings. Mu Yangling walked deeper and deeper with the mustache in his mouth, listening to the 6 directions, seeing all directions, and just like this, he met the 2 dirty teenagers under the tree. Chi Heiran and Fan Zijin looked at Mu Yangling with piercing eyes. With the mustache in their mouths, they swallowed involuntarily. Even though Mu Yangling has the soul of an adult, she couldn't help but blush at this moment. She took the mustache out of her mouth, thought about it, tore off the part that was stained with saliva and stuffed it into her mouth, and handed the rest for 2 teenagers. Chi Heiran took a careful look at Mu Yangling, and seemed to be sure that she was not malicious before quickly pulling off the mustache, and immediately tore off more than half of it and stuffed it into Fan Zijin's mouth, saying, "Thank you." Fan Zijin was so choked that his eyes rolled down. Mu Yangling had no choice but to take off the water bottle on his waist and send it over. Chi Heiran hurriedly poured water on him again. Fan Zijin tore off most of the mustache and swallowed it, and then he recovered. He gave Chi Heiran a look, got up and saluted. "Thank you, miss. My cousin, my younger brother and his family were separated and wandered here, but we don't know what the girl's name is, where she lives, and when we find our family, we will come back and report back. The reborn wife is farming." Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2. Hearing this, Mu Yangling took a closer look at them, only to find something unusual. Although their skin was also dark, it was not like his father had worked all the year round, but it seemed to have been painted on purposely. Moreover, the hand holding the mustache is thinner and more tender than a girl's, isn't it? At first glance, this kind of person is a son of a rich family who is in trouble. Mu Yangling hesitated for a moment. After all, he felt sorry for the two of them who were just teenagers, and asked, "Where are your family members? Do you need my help?" Chi Heiran opened his mouth to answer, but Fan Zijian tugged at him, and smiled at Mu Yangling. "Thank you, girl, we have found the way, and we are not very far away, so I won't bother you, and please tell me the address, we will repay you in the future." Mu Yangling saw that the half-grown boy was so vigilant, he couldn't help smiling. He wasn't annoyed, he just shook his head and said, "No need, it's just a nonsense." Looking at the sky, he looked at their positions, he pointed out the way out of the mountain for them, and said, "Go over there, and after 2/4 of an hour, you should see a small road. You can just walk out along that small road. After all, turn around and leave." Seeing Mu Yangling's back disappeared, Fan Zijian fell limply to the ground. He glared at Chi Heiran and said angrily, "Don't tell us our identities anymore. We've already arrived in Xingzhou, and we can find them after 2 days' walk." "Brother Chi." Chi Heiran rolled his eyes, "We are penniless, how can we find it? Besides, this man is a good man." Fan Zijian jumped up, "You know. I just know that if I say she is a good person, she is a good person. We were deceived before because we listened to you. If we listened to mine, we would not be deceived. It's not that you are unrestrained, and you answer what others ask. People who originally had no malicious intentions also became malicious." Fan Zijian shouted, dissatisfied. Chi Heiran was even more dissatisfied. "It's obvious that you don't know people well. You are not careful." The two teenagers quarreled instantly. Chi Heiran had the upper hand at first, but he was never good at quarreling, so he was defeated by Fan Zijian in a short time. He got angry and tore out the mustache in his hand, gagged him. Fan Zijian stared at him and gradually calmed down. Seeing that he was only holding a small piece of mustard pancake in his hand, he was really distressed, so he tore out half of it from his side and gave it to him, saying vaguely, "Eat it quickly, we'll go on our way after eating." Chi Heiran snorted, and said, "I am strong and strong, so I don't need to eat it, you should eat it yourself." Fan Zijian glared, and said angrily, "Take it, I still need your protection. If there are a few more hooligans coming, can't you beat them back?" Chi Heiran said complacently, "Now you know that I am good at kung fu, right? What's the use of reading well? I have to carry it on my back to escape, ha ha ha." After speaking, he laughed complacently. Fan Zijian snorted coldly, and said mockingly, "What's so good about having well-developed limbs and a simple mind? If it weren't for me, no matter how good your skills are, 40 or 50 people will surround you and beat you to pieces." Mu Yangling, who was hiding in the dark, heard the two teenagers arguing, and saw them feeding each other the mustache in their hands, and instantly twitched the corners of her mouth. Why did she have a feeling of falling in love and killing each other? How can a human be full? It's just that a 9-year-old girl has to eat 3 or 4 to feel a little bit, let alone these two half-old boys. After thinking about it, Mu Yangling turned around and left, and soon came back with a pheasant and a rabbit in his hands. The two teenagers were still sitting and resting, probably because their hands and feet were weak, and they didn't get up, but they didn't bicker anymore. Up. Just as Mu Yangling approached, Chi Heiran jumped over, stood in front of Fan Zijian, and asked cautiously, "Who?" Fan Zijian also tensed his back. Mu Yangling threw the pheasant and rabbit in his hand in front of them, and said, "Here for you, deal with the pheasant and eat it, and take the rabbit to the town." Mu Yangling thought for a while, and said, "If your journey passes by Ming, if you are in Shui County, take them to the county to sell, and the price in the county is higher than that in the countryside." When Chi Heiran saw Mu Yangling appearing, a big smile appeared on his face, and he proudly raised his head at Fan Zijian. The words "look, I'll just say she's a good person were almost written on his face. The corner of Fan Zijan's mouth twitched, and he cursed an idiot inwardly. He got up and saluted Mu Yangling, with a grateful face. Thank you so much, girl. You must tell us your address no matter what, so that we have a chance to repay in the future. Looking at the unrelenting Fan Zijan, Mu Yangling had to admit that the other boy was definitely not as cute as another boy. Really, does she look like a bad guy? Seeing that the other party was not relaxed, Mu Yangling said without hesitation, my home is easy to find. It's in the village at the foot of the mountain. My surname is Mu. There is only my surname Mu in the whole village. You just need to ask for it. After finishing speaking, he turned around leave. This time I really left. Mu Yangling wanted to go into the mountain to see the trap he dug last night. My mother doesn't like to eat pheasant, and she dislikes firewood. Wild animals are indeed a little oily, and the meat is not tender enough. Give her and Dad a tooth offering, and sell the rest. It is not difficult for her to hunt a pheasant and a rabbit, but they are 2 caddies of fine rice, enough for my mother and younger brother to eat for 3 days. Mu Yangling shook his head, drove these thoughts out of his mind, and thought to himself, she came here as a soldier anyway, so she can't be so fussy, the other party is just a child, so help if you can. Walking all the way, Mu Yangling had a string of pheasants and rabbits hanging on his waist, and only when he saw the last big trap, he heard a few groans of ho-ho. Mu Yangling ran up with a cry, and a fat wild boar lay down in the trap and was trying to climb up with its nose arched, but it was probably because its hind legs were injured and weak, and the trap was big enough to climb up. Not come up. Mu Yangling looked up to the sky and laughed 3 times, it's true that heaven will not kill me, now I have the money to pay taxes. Mu Yangling looked at the wild boar with glowing eyes, and after thinking about it, she was still reluctant to kill it, but she would definitely not be able to take it out alive. Mu Yangling squatted by the pit, looking at the panicked wild boar trying to crawl out, not only failed to break through the trap, but scarred himself. Her eyes flicked over its limbs, thinking that if it broke its limbs, it would not be impossible for her to bind them again. Mu Yangling dropped the prey on his body, squeezed his fists, and smiled, brother pig, don't blame me for being cruel, just blame you for being born at the wrong time. As she spoke, she walked around behind the wild boar, jumped down, and just rode on the wild boar. Without thinking about it, she punched the head of the wild boar, paying attention when hitting, trying not to kill the wild boar. The wild boar yelped and knelt down in the pit. Mu Yangling just beat it so that it couldn't move. Before it recovered, he quickly grabbed its hoof with one hand, pulled it, and made a crack sound. One of its front legs broke off. The wild boar kept howling, and Mu Yangling shot quickly. After a while, her 4 legs were broken by her, and the whole pig collapsed in the pit. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 3. The wild boar collapsed in the pit, and could only groan, hum. Mu Yangling got off the wild boar happily, and raised the 200-pound wild boar with both hands. There was no way, she only had 9 at the age of 18, she was still too short, so she could only rely on throwing it. Fortunately, she used her cleverness, so the seriously injured wild boar only howled twice in fright. Only then did Mu Yangling climb out of the trap, folded nearby branches to cover the trap again, then hung the rabbit, pheasant, and other things on his waist, and carried the wild boar on his shoulders out of the mountain. A villager was harvesting grain at the foot of the mountain. When he saw a wild boar moving out, he exclaimed. When he got closer, he found Mu Yangling whose sight was completely blocked by the wild boar. Oh my god, isn't this the eldest daughter of the Mu family? Ma Dazwang looked at Mu Yangling, whose waist was covered with prey, and a wild boar was carried on his shoulders. He had been buried by the prey, and secretly clicked his tongue, "It would be great if this was my daughter." What? Aunt Ma slapped him on the head, and spat, "If your daughter doesn't get married, you don't care? Oh, this girl Yang Ling is so majestic, how can she find her husband's family in the future?" Ma Dazwang murmured, "He is not ugly, but he is stronger and can subsidize the family." Under the pressure of Aunt Ma's eyes, Ma Dazwang did not dare to say any more. Mu Yangling approached gradually, and only saw Ma Dazwang and his wife when she heard the sound of talking. There was no way, the prey blocked her sight. She held the wild boar on her shoulder with one hand, and with the other hand came out to greet them, and said with a smile, "Uncle Ma, Aunt Ma, what are you doing?" Looking closer, the shock was even greater. Uncle Ma and his wife stared dumbfounded at the prey on her body. The wild boar suddenly struggled a few times and let out two low-pitched calls. Mu Yangling pressed down with his hand, and the wild boar couldn't move. Aunt Ma pointed at the wild boar tremblingly and said, "Is it alive?" Mu Yangling smiled and nodded, "Living is worth more than dead." Mu Yangling felt a little regretful, "It's a pity that this place is too far away from the county seat. Otherwise, if you carry it to the county seat, you can get at least 500 coins more." While regretting, Mu Yangling rushed home briskly. She ate too little this morning, and now she is very hungry. She should go back to fill her stomach before going to the countryside. Dad should be back by now, right? Uncle Ma and his wife watched Mu Yangling leave in a daze. Uncle Ma said, "It's really hard to get married. The Mu family lives alone at the foot of the mountain, and there are only 3 generations of the Mu family in Linchin village. Mu Yangling's grandfather is half of the Hu people's blood, but his body and appearance are more like a Han mother. He is thin and thin. He was excluded by the Hu people who advocated force. Seeing that he was honest, the director of Mingshui County let him settle down in Linchin village. Because his grandfather didn't look like a barbarian at all, he easily integrated into the villagers and married a daughter of the village. Her grandmother gave birth to her father Mu Shan. Maybe it's inherited from generation to generation. Mu Shi's face is a bit deep, plus he is tall and strong like an ox. A 5-year-old child is stronger than a 7-year-old child. Adults don't mind, but children often don't like people who are different from themselves. Mu Shi was quickly excluded by the children in the village, and there were even several bloody incidents. In order not to make his father sad, the family moved at the foot of the mountain. The contact with the village was also reduced, until Mu Shi married his wife and gave birth to Mu Yangling and the others. Mu Yangling returned home quickly, and Shu Wanyang, who was sweeping the yard with a broom, opened her mouth wide when she saw her. She knew that her daughter was very strong, but she wasn't so strong, right? Finally arrived home, Mu Yangling put the wild boar on the ground, only to find her mother staring at her wide-eyed when she looked up. "Mother," Mu Yangling smirked, with her hands behind her back, feeling a little nervous, "She probably didn't give my mother away." "Freak out? Yangling is back." Mu Shi came out of the room. Mu Yangling's eyes lit up. He jumped forward, and shouted, "Father, there was a wild boar lying in the trap, and I brought it back." "Good job." After Mu Shi boasted, he saw his wife who was staring at them with wide eyes. He suddenly became nervous, stepped forward to embrace his wife and said, "Wanyang, you go into the house to rest, I will sweep the place later." Shu Wanyang knew that they were hiding something from her. Tears crept into her eyes, and said with tears in her eyes, "What are you hiding from me?" "No, no." Mu Shi waved his hands again and again. He was most afraid of seeing Shu Wanyang cry. He became at a loss for a while, and looked at his daughter as if asking for help. Mu Yangling had no choice but to bow his head obediently and admit his mistake. "Mother, it's my fault. I'm too strong. I didn't dare to tell you because I was afraid that you would worry." Shu Wanyang was really worried. She stepped forward and took her daughter's hand, squeezed it, and said worriedly, "It's no different from ordinary 9-year-old girls. How can they be so strong? Even the middle-aged in the village can't carry a wild boar. In the future, you can carry it. Don't be like this to outsiders, or you may not be able to marry in the future. The most important thing is to conceive the crime. Now is the troubled times. The daughter's ability looks good, but it will also cause her troubles." Xu Huanyang was trained by the court at a young age, so her vision is naturally farther than that of Mu Shi, so she is not very happy about her daughter's infinite ability. But at this time they are only living in a small mountain village. There is no need to speak out to scare their daughter and husband. Xu Huanyang supported her stomach and said, "Okay, you guys pack up the prey quickly. Since Lijhen has promised to help us slow down for 3 days, it is necessary to collect enough tax money as soon as possible, otherwise it will be difficult for Li Zhang." "I'll take the prey to town," Mu Shi immediately said. "Take Yang Ling with you too. How can you carry so many things by yourself? But you are not allowed to carry them, push them with a trolley. When you arrive in the town, you can directly find a hotel restaurant to sell them. Don't stay on the street too long. And don't argue with people. Mother, Dad goes to town every day, why do you always have endless things to tell?" Mu Yangling's ears were almost confused. Seeing Mu Shi still listening with a smile, he suddenly felt that his father's patience was too much. "Better." Xu Huanyang sighed, "Your father has a violent temper, am I worried that he will argue with others? You two are very strong, I am afraid that you will cause trouble outside." Mu Shi quickly assured, "Don't worry, Huanyang, I will definitely not argue with others." Seeing his daughter at the side, Mu Shi assured again, "I will also keep a close eye on Aling and prevent her from conflicting with others." Only then did Xu Huanyang smile, and she went into the kitchen and said, "I'll prepare some food for the two of you on the way, you guys pack up first." Hey, seeing his wife entering the kitchen, Mu Shi pulled his daughter aside and ordered, "Why did you come back carrying the wild boar by yourself? You should tell Dad to get it. You almost scared me." Your mother. The reborn wife is farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 4. He knew that his daughter was strong, and now it was a troubled time, so there was nothing wrong with being strong. He was even glad that his daughter had inherited the talent of his ancestors. Mu Yangling always thought that this talent of hers came from her previous life. After all, she was also very strong in her previous life, at least much stronger than those male comrades in the team, but in this life, this talent has been guaranteed. The improvement made her complacent for a while, thinking that it was a benefit of reincarnation. But in the few words of his father Mu Shi later, Mu Yangling knew that this was fundamentally a blood talent. Mu Yangling's great-grandfather was a human and a warrior in the tribe. It is said that he never lost when he followed the tribe to fight everywhere. And her great-grandmother was the spoils of her great-grandfather, a Han woman he brought back from the battlefield. It is said that she was beautiful and charming, and once attracted warriors in the tribe to fight for her. Fortunately, no one could defeat her great-grandfather. Snatched great-grandmother from him. Great-grandfather had only one wife in his life, great-grandmother, and great-grandmother only gave birth to a son for great-grandfather, who was Mu Yangling's grandfather. Mu Yangling's grandfather looked a lot like his great-grandmother, beautiful and refined, but unfortunately, even his strength was inherited from his great-grandmother, and his great-grandfather was worried about him. In the tribe, the strong is the most respected, and even the leader competes for posts. Whoever is stronger is the leader. A son like this can only be slaughtered in the tribe. In order to train his grandfather, his great-grandfather collected a lot of martial arts cheats for him, and even created a set of kung fu for him based on his weak strength and agility. Unfortunately, after his grandfather practiced it, he could only rank in the middle of the tribal warriors. If the grandfather is like the rough guys in the tribe, the great-grandfather will be satisfied, but this son has the same face as his wife. This is a disaster in the Hu tribe. Without his protection, he can foresee the future of his son's wife. Miserable life, this is what he cannot tolerate. Therefore, after his wife died of illness and he was seriously injured, the warrior of the tribe gave more than half of his property to his only son, drove him out of the tribe, and let him live in the place of the Han people. The warrior believes that a son who looks like a Han and possesses military strength should not have a bad life among the Han, at least he will not face the plight of the tribe. And Mu Yangling's grandfather went all the way south, and finally settled in this small Linchan village in Qilai Country, Mingshui County, Xinzhou, Xinyuan Prefecture. Finally, he married her grandmother and gave birth to her father, Mu Shi. When he came to the Han people, his son Mu Shi possessed the power he had dreamed of. This made the grandfather feel a sense of misfortune and sadness. Exclusion. Even the wife's natal family has less and less contact with them, but Mu Yangling's grandfather no longer thinks about moving, because the final punishment for all evasion behaviors for convenience will still fall on the descendants, and he does not want the descendants to replace them. Bearing these pains by himself, he passed this sentence to Mu Shi, and Mu Shi told Mu Yangling to warn future generations, when encountering difficulties, don't think about escaping, because your evasion may cause punishment to fall on you descendants, and you will suffer even more. Maybe the grandfather is right, because although Mu Yangling was born with supernatural power, her younger brother did not excel. At least the 5-year-old Mu Boan, like ordinary children, did not inherit the supernatural power of his ancestors. Grandma and father returned to the Hu tribe, and their family may not be better off than they are now. You know, she and her brother are not bad looking. According to my father, they look like my grandfather, and my grandfather looks like my great-grandmother. Mu Yangling's strength is much stronger than that of Mu Shi. In order to let her control her strength so as not to hurt herself or others, Mu Shi taught her Kung Fu since she was 5 years old. It was brought out by her father and written by her grandfather in the martial arts I practiced on the parchment. Although the tribal warrior sent his son away, he may still have the desire to inherit his divine power for future generations. When his son left, he not only gave him all the martial arts secrets he had collected, but also wrote down the Kung Fu he had practiced. Give him away. It is said to be martial arts, but in fact it is some outsiders' Kung Fu, and those so-called martial arts cheats are all ordinary moves, and there is not even a book of inner skills, which disappointed Mu Yangling, who was full of expectations. In addition to practicing the Kung Fu that her father taught her, Mu Yangling also used the method of the special forces in her previous life to train herself. There is no problem with grasping hands, but now she is just a little hunter, and she does not need these things at all. In this troubled world, however, Mu Yangling didn't want to use it one day. The father and daughter tied the wild boar to the trolley and other small prey to themselves, and Mu Shi pushed the trolley to Qilai Township. It took about half an hour to walk from the village to the town, and it took them 3.5 minutes to walk quickly. People in the village like to go to the market as early as possible. Only the father and daughter went there at this time, so they didn't meet anyone along the way. Although it is a troubled time, Qilai Township is still very lively, all because the imperial court's shackles on the people have weakened, business travelers and artisans are relatively free to come and go, and the folk market has also developed accordingly. It was not the first time for Mu Yangling to come to the town, so he looked around and said to Mu Shi, "Father, why don't I go to set up a stall with these things first, and you push the wild boar to the restaurant? Let's go together, maybe the shopkeepers are looking at us little prey." Mu Shi said, "There are many well-to-do families in the town, let's go to restaurants to try our luck, if not, then go back and set up a stall." Mu Yangling thought about it, and followed Mu Shi to the center of the town. The best inns, restaurants in the town are in the center of the town. Their wild game is liked by both restaurants, because Mu Shi and her are both capable, and they rarely go empty-handed when they go to the mountains, so the supply of wild game is very stable. As early as 5 years ago, Mushi had a fixed supply relationship with them. As long as the prey is caught, the restaurants will pick it first, and then send it to the market for sale. Among them, because restaurants require the largest amount, they are given priority over restaurants. The largest restaurant in the town is called Piaoxiang Lu, the owner's surname is Lu, one of the 3 Yuan Weilang in the township, and the shopkeeper's surname is Zhang. The largest restaurant is called Ziwixialo, and the owner's surname is Zhao, who is also Yuan Weilang. The shopkeeper is a nephew of his own family, and the last Yuan Weilang in the village opened the Yuela Inn. The owner is called Sun Yu, and the shopkeeper's surname is Qian. Because they often deal with these 3 families, when Mu Yangling was 6 years old and followed his father to the town to sell prey, Mu Shi gave her a detailed introduction. The purpose is to let Mu Yangling remember not to annoy these 3 families easily, because these 3 families are the most powerful people in the village, and even the county magistrate of Mingshui County will give them 3 points. Mu Shi pushed the trolley to the side door of Piaoxiang building. The restaurant clerk opened the door and said with a smile, "Uncle Mu, are you here to deliver game again?" When he saw the wild boar on the trolley, he was startled. "Is this still alive?" Mu Shi smiled and nodded. "Fall into the trap, luckily survived, thinking that the rich people in the town like to eat fresh food, and now the weather is hot, so I didn't dare to kill at home. This is good, our shopkeeper will definitely like it, just wait, I'll call the shopkeeper over." The clerk ran back excitedly, while muttering in his mouth, "It's really powerful, even a wild boar dares to catch it alive." You must know that the wild boar is the most ferocious. It is not as gentle as the domestic pig. Once it is annoyed, it is easy to gnaw and trample people. The shopkeeper was originally at the front, and he only planned to let the deputy shopkeeper casually buy some wild game and save it for later use. Hearing that there were wild boars alive, he hurriedly left his abacus and ran over. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 5. Shopkeeper Zhang looked around at the wild boar, and nodded in relief. Yes, we have collected the whole wild boar, and there is no need to weigh it. You can withdraw 8 taels of silver from the front account, and our boss rewards you for the excess." Mu Yangling's eyes lit up, but Mu Shi shook his head and said, "Thank you shopkeeper Zhang, but this wild boar is not worth so much money." Mu Shi took the roe deer from his daughter and asked, "I don't know if the shopkeeper wants a roe deer, I have other small prey here." Shopkeeper Zhang looked at Mu Yangling, who was covered in prey, and Mu Yangling gave him a big smile. Shopkeeper Zhang felt that the child was a bit stupid, but he quickly moved his eyes away from her face, and put his eyes on her face. On the prey on her body, she asked, "Are these also fresh?" "I just called back this morning." Mu Shi looked at shopkeeper Zhang with a silly smile on his face. Shopkeeper Zhang nodded slightly. "Let's keep some. Go back and get the money from the account. You don't have to refuse. My boss is going to have a banquet these few days. The game masters like it very much. If you have fresh ones, you can buy them tomorrow. Bring it back to me." Mu Shi was only silent for a moment before nodding his head in response. "Then I would like to thank the shopkeeper." Possessing himself, he carried the bound wild boar and brought them into the courtyard, and took some rabbits, pheasants, and roe deer from Mu Yangling's body and gave them to them. After sending it in, he came out and took his daughter to the front account to get the money. Everyone was stunned, even the shopkeeper Zhang, who had dealt with Mu Shi a lot, was also speechless. "I didn't expect Mu Shi to have such strength, no wonder he can go out of the mountain every day without empty hands." Even when he closed the mountain to cultivate forests, he didn't feel embarrassed. "The shopkeeper is joking, how can there be any closure of mountains and forests in the past 2 years, the man said with a smile. Shopkeeper Zhang patted him on the head and said, "How long have you known Mu Shi?" "But I have dealt with him for more than 10 years. The golden soldiers never came here before, and this is not a border gate yet. The government decree came into force, and at that time it was said that the mountains would be closed for forest cultivation for half a year, and no one dared to go hunting in the mountains. How is it like now? Shopkeeper Zhang shook his head, and went into the restaurant with his hands behind his back. The Orion relies on the mountains and forests for food. Once the mountains are closed for forestation, life will be difficult. However, there is a rule in this dynasty that the mountains should be closed for half a year, from the beginning of winter to the beginning of summer. It is a pity that it is a troubled time, and the government does not make sense, and the people cannot even eat. This place has become a border again, and wars and other events often affect the mountains and forests, so the policy of closing the mountains for afforestation is useless. Mushi led his daughter to the front, and said to her, "You wait here for daddy, and daddy goes in to get the money." "Father, let me go in with you," Mu Yangling said excitedly. Although she had been to the town several times, she had never entered the Piaoxiang Tower. "Just go in and get the money yourself." Mushi patted her head and said, "That's not okay, we still have a lot of prey. You look at the cart here, and Dad goes in to get it. There are many guests inside, so we can't run into them." Only then did Mu Yangling know the reason why Mushi never asked her to enter the Piaoxiang Tower. Mu Yangling looked down at the prey in his hand, and nodded regretfully, "Go, Dad, I'm here waiting for you." Mushi put the trolley on the side of the road and strode towards Piaoxiang building. Although shopkeeper Zhang is in charge of the restaurant, the accountant is another person, so Mushi has to go to the front every time to deposit money with the accountant. There was a message later, so the accountant was also very straightforward, wrote a note for Mushi to sign, and gave him 8 taels of silver, and said with a smile, "My brother earned enough today, and 8 taels of silver is enough for your family for half a year. Have you used it? Dude has money now, why don't you buy some properties? Also leave some property for future generations." Others don't know how much Mushi earns. He often has to settle the bill for Mushi, but he knows that this person has much more money than him. His own family has purchased more than 10 acres of land. Normally, Mushi should have more. Mushi smiled wryly and said, "How can I have that ability? I can only rely on my sons and daughters to make it on their own. My wife keeps taking medicine every year, and now she is about to give birth again. This money is still in time for the autumn tax, otherwise I won't even be able to pay the autumn tax up." The accountant frowned slightly. "This year's tax has increased by 10%. I heard that the labor under your staff has also increased." Mushi nodded heavily. "I'm the only one in the family, so I can't rest assured that the mother and the children are alone at home, so with the addition of taxes and money, my family is also very heavy. Kilai Township is not big, and the accountant happens to be well informed, and he is most interested in these things. It is true that he has never heard of Mushi buying a property, but he has to go to the pharmacy every few days." The accountant shook his head regrettably. He had regained his mental balance, so what if he could make more money? The mother-in-law of the family held back, not to mention leaving the family property to the son of the family. "I am afraid that they will not even be able to earn the dowry of the daughter." Thinking of Mushi's daughter carrying prey with him to sell in the market all the year round, I felt even more regretful, and his subordinates moved more simply, stuffing 8 liang of silver into his hand, and said with a smile, "Take it, if our master likes it, you can buy it. There will definitely be rewards for sending things over tomorrow, so don't spend all your money, save some, buy some land, and gradually save your family fortune. No one can become a fat man with one bite." Mushi took the money, nodded in response, and felt a little worried. His Aling is 9 years old, and he will be able to say goodbye in a few years, but the family has not saved a dowry. Looked down by her in-laws. It seems that I have to save some things for Aling. Mushi went out of Piaoxiang building full of thoughts, and the shopkeeper Zhang distributed the wild boars, kept some parts in the restaurant, and sent the rest to the owner. He was coming in at this time, and saw Mushi with his head bowed, feeling a little dejected. After leaving, he asked the cashier, "What's the matter? You should be very happy to get 8 taels of silver." The accountant smiled and said, "It's nothing, just talking about this year's tax and labor. He didn't save a penny, and he still doesn't have any money, so it's a bit sad." The shopkeeper frowned. "This year's taxes are indeed heavier. The most important thing is the additional labor." Zhang shook his head. "I don't know how many people will sell their sons and daughters this year." The accountant glanced at the shopkeeper Zhang, and said, "The shopkeeper gave him 8 taels of silver because of this, right? You must know that the wild boar is worth 5 taels at most, and those roe deer, rabbits, and pheasants are only worth about 6 taels. The shopkeeper's heart is good." Shopkeeper Zhang snorted, and said, "You think too much. I'm not so kind. This is a reward from the owner to Mu Shi. This Mu Shi has been supplying our Piaoxiang building for more than 10 years, and when did you see him take advantage of us? Don't look at me today. I saw him 8 taels of silver, and tomorrow he will definitely not charge money when he delivers things." Shopkeeper Zhang sighed. "Just because he is honest and fair, the boss also appreciates him. He is rewarded for his talents." At this time, Mu Yangling was also asking Mu Shi, "Father, just now shopkeeper Zhang clearly said that wild boars are worth 8 taels of silver. Why are you pushing them away and leaving so many small prey?" Mu Shi pushed the trolley, looked at his daughter who had just arrived under his ribs, patted her head with his hand, and said, "Son, you have to remember that some advantages cannot be taken. Shopkeeper Zhang is tolerant to us, and we should know more about it. Well, the reward was decided by him. It's okay if Lu Dong's family likes it, but if he doesn't like it, wouldn't he just stand in front of us for nothing? Tomorrow, you can bring a few hares to the shopkeeper Zhang's family, and I'll give it to the restaurants and some prey there. Even if Lu Dong's family doesn't like it, he can't blame shopkeeper Zhang if there are things I sent over later." Only then did Mu Yangling look at Mu Shi in surprise. The other party looked nothing like her rough father who would only stand and be taught by his mother. Mu Yangling was secretly vigilant. Although she had lived for more than 20 years in her previous life, she actually lived in a simple environment. After graduating from university and joining the army for less than a year, she had to enter Reincarnation and Reincarnation. It's just that Qilai Township and Linchan Village, where the mountains and forests are 3 points and 1 line, are not as good as the old man's finger in terms of human experience. There are still many things in this world that you have to learn and do by yourself, but you can't be satisfied with what you know. In the end, the short-sighted one becomes yourself instead. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 6. Mu Shi patted his daughter's head, and said, "It's not so cheap. Dad has dealt with Piaoxianglu for more than 10 years, and knows them much better than you. There are so many suppliers in their family. How much has been changed? Only Dad has not been removed, not only because our family has a stable supply, but also because I am kind and the price is fair. But Piaoxianglu is rich and powerful, and still cares about the reward." Mu Yangling always thought that the extra money was a reward, not included in the purchase price. Modern people like to give rewards, but in fact, the rich people in ancient times liked it more. If you are happy, you will be rewarded with silver leaves. If you are more happy, there may be gold leaf rewards. When Mu Yangling was shopping, he would see those rich old ladies, they rewarded it like this. Other sons gave the jade pendants or fan pendants on their bodies to the rewarders. Those things were not very valuable to them, but to Mu Yangling and the others, they were much more important than silver leaves. Because most of the silver leaves that are taken out to reward people are worth 8 or 6 cents, but a piece of jade pendant or fan pendant is worth several taels of silver. Piaoxianglu is rich and powerful, but there is no reason to reward people in this way. If the owner of Piaoxiangla gave the silver reward this time, we would just thank you, but the owner is the shopkeeper Zhang, and he is just giving. Most of the people who run the errands saw that our family was in a difficult situation and borrowed an excuse to help us. Since this is the case, we can't make it difficult for him. Not to mention making up the extra part, we have to send it to Piaoxiangla for free. Some pray, so that other people's mouths can be blocked. After his parents passed away, Mushi was alone in the world, and he was much smarter than his daughter in dealing with the world, and he was better able to resist all kinds of temptations. Mu Yangling lowered his head in thought, and then said seriously, "Father, I am eager for quick success. I am not as good as you." Mushi laughed loudly, rubbing his daughter's hair in a funny way, and said, "Little girl, how old are you? How old is Daddy? Do you want to catch up with me now? Let's go through some more things." Mu Yangling curled his lips and thought to himself, "My age in the previous life plus the 9 years in this life is older than you. Unfortunately, I have been in the campus all the time, and after I finally graduated, I joined the army. Although there were times of struggle, but with the old man who has fought against villagers, relatives, bandits, and businessmen, her experience can be shown on a blank sheet of paper." Mu Yangling was a little frustrated. Mushi saw it, but it was very funny. His daughter is only 9 years old. He usually thinks that she is too stable and doesn't have the lively and mischievous nature of children. But now it seems that this child has been imitating adults, and has covered up her childishness. Mushi was a little worried when he thought of this. The child didn't know why he didn't like to play with the children in the village. If she could play with the children in the village, she might be more lively. Mushi was thinking about how to let his daughter have more contact with the children in the village, when Mu Yangling pulled his sleeves. Mushi looked down at her. Mu Yangling pointed to the left and said, "Father, someone called you." The man called Stone at them should be calling him Dad. Mu Yangling had heard his uncle call him that. Mushi turned his head to look, and saw a stooped old lady looking at him uncertainly with a basket on her shoulders, and when he saw him looking over, he called out uncertainly, "Stone." Mushi opened his mouth slightly in astonishment, and then carefully identified her facial features, "Auntie." The old lady immediately smiled gratifiedly, walked over holding a little girl's hand with a basket on her shoulders, and said with a smile on her face, "It's really a stone. At first, my aunt thought she had made a mistake." Mushi was also a little excited. "Auntie, are you also here to go to the market?" "Well, my nephew hasn't seen you for 3 or 4 years." The old lady nodded with a smile on her face. "It's been 3 or 4 years." Seeing Mu Yangling standing next to Mushi, she asked, "Is this your eldest daughter, Aling?" "Yes." Mushi tugged at his daughter, "This is your aunt, call someone quickly." Mu Yangling was taken aback for a moment, and then realized that this was the great aunt. He quickly straightened his body, raised a big smiling face, and shouted, "Big aunt." "Okay, okay." The great aunt was obviously very happy, touched her body, and took out 5 copper coins and stuffed them into Mu Yangling's hands. "This is from my great aunt, take it quickly, take it quickly." Mu Yangling went to see Mushi hesitantly, and when he saw Mushi nodding, he put away the 5 cents and thanked him, "Thank you, auntie." The great aunt was very happy. "Aling has grown up so much and is still so sensible. Isn't that kid in your family already 5 years old?" "Yes, this winter solstice will be 5 years old." The great aunt said sadly, "Isn't it? When your rich cousin had an accident, your daughter-in-law was really going to give birth. In the blink of an eye, 5 years have passed." Mushi's face was also a little sad. Seeing that her clothes were neat but full of patches, he asked with concern, "Auntie, how have you been these years?" "It's okay, the old woman can still move, and she can plant a few acres of land, and it's okay to raise 2 granddaughters." But Mushi and Mu Yangling knew that the great aunt must not be doing well. The clothes on her body were covered with patches, Her hands were full of cracks and thick calluses, and she could see the marks of overwork, but her face was full of sallowness, and the little girl standing next to her was wearing tattered clothes. Her hands were full of work calluses, and there was black mud between her fingers. The meat prey on their carts does not move, or more precisely, the other party looks at the meat and does not move. When the great aunt gave her 5 copper coins, she looked up at her, a little envious, a little worried, and more reluctant. Mu Yangling looked at the other party's obviously distressed situation, and felt that the 5 copper coins in his arms were scalding. While Mu Yangling was thinking wildly, the great aunt had finished reminiscing with Mu Shi. She said with a smile, "Then go and set up a stall, it's already noon, if you don't go, you won't find a good place. Your niece and I are going back to the great aunt came here to sell the eggs from the family, and now that they are sold out, she naturally has to go back. The Zishan village where she lives is a little far from the town." Mu Shi took a pheasant and a rabbit from the trolley and stuffed them to her. "Auntie, these are for the 2 children to build up their bodies. You can take them back for a tooth-beating sacrifice." "How can this be done?" said the great aunt. "This is what you need to survive. You are different from us. We have land and can grow our own food. You can just use these for food to live on. You can't take it? Hurry up, keep it." Mu Yangling said, "Auntie, take it quickly, my father is amazing, just go to the mountains tomorrow to fight." "Yes, Auntie, please put it away quickly. My little niece is 7 years old, right? This meaty smell is indispensable. My family has nothing else, but this wild animal has never been missing." Mu Shi stuffed it into the basket of the auntie. The great aunt's face flushed red, and she looked very embarrassed, but she looked at the little granddaughter who was looking at her anxiously, and she didn't say any more words of refusal. The great aunt murmured, "Then, thank you, nephew." The great aunt pulled the little granddaughter over and said, "Xiaolin, quickly say thank you to your cousin." "Thank you, cousin." "Hey, good." Mu Shi took out 5 copper coins from Xiaolin's hand, rubbed her head with his big hand, and said with a smile, "Eat well and grow up well." Xiaolin smiled shyly. The great aunt opened her mouth, her eyes were slightly red, and she didn't say anything of rejection. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 7. Mu Shi took his daughter to Fang Zhen's place to pay taxes and get a stall. In the past, the bazaar and the grass market did not pay taxes, allowing the common people to freely set up stalls to sell some small things, but the great Zhou dynasty has been defeated repeatedly in recent years. Therefore, the commercial tax is extremely heavy, and even the markets in towns and grass markets in the countryside are included in the tax collection. In the past, Xinyuan Mansion had to pay taxes when entering the city when it was not a border gate. Later, because Xinyuan Mansion became a border gate, in addition to paying ordinary taxes, they were forced to raise military salaries from time to time. Because the tax was too heavy, Xinyuan Mansion almost did not rebel. "I had to cancel the city entry tax and some miscellaneous items, but that's it. The extra messy tax burden that I have to pay every year is also very heavy. So now there are many fewer people setting up stalls. Even if they come late, there are still stalls to choose from." Mu Shi was already a regular customer in the market, so as soon as Fang Zheng saw him, he gave him a sign and said, "The stall you used to use happened to be empty, so take it." Mu Shi thanked him, took the copper plate to pay the tax, and then pushed the trolley to his booth. Sitting cross-legged in the back, Mu Yangling asked curiously, "Father, is that Aunt dear? Why haven't I seen her? She hugged you before. You refused to breastfeed back then. It was she who taught us to feed you with rice soup. That's how she supported you." "Yeah." Mu Yangling's eyes were full of doubts. She had memories since she was born, how could she not remember? Mu Yangling tilted his head and thought about it carefully, which made Mu Shi laugh and said, "Silly girl, you didn't remember it at that time, how could you remember? Don't think about it, your great-aunt hasn't come back since you were 4 years old. You have never seen it before passing through our village. Is the great-aunt married far away? In this era, only those who marry far away do not return to their natal homes. Mushi shook his head. No, it's in Zishan village at the back of the mountain. It's just over the mountain to the west of our house. It's very fast. Mu Yangling was surprised. Then why doesn't my aunt go home? Yes, the mountain is dangerous, and my aunt is getting old, so she has to take a long detour. Although the West Mountain is not as dangerous as the mountain in front of their house, it is still lush and full of ferocious beasts, so most people don't go over the West Mountain, and most of them have to take a long detour, which will take an hour longer. Mushi shook his head. It's not all like that. Mushi mused. Your great-aunt married the Ma family in Zishan village, and she has only one son, your cousin. The great-aunt Maliu's life is not good, it can even be said to be miserable. She was young and widowed, and it was very easy to pull out her eldest son, but his son died early because of being involved in a fierce fight. His daughter-in-law was also beaten and seriously injured in order to save her son. Later, she was seriously injured and gave birth to a baby boy, but she did not live for more than 35 minutes, now she only has 2 granddaughters to depend on each other. Mushi said, your cousin was brought into trouble by one of his cousins, but their family not only did not apologize, but also blamed the matter on your great-aunt, saying that she K-Fook offspring and grandson, your uncle, and uncle you can't help her, and your great-aunt is disheartened, so she never went back to her mother's house. Mushi was also very apologetic as he said, your great-aunt was kind to me back then, but all these years my father has been thinking about you so much that I forgot about her. The daughter-in-law is running away, and I don't know how to live in Zishan village. Mushio said that his heart became more and more uneasy, and his face became a little ugly. After returning home, father will go to Zishan village to see your aunt. Mu Yangling also had a good impression of this aunt. Hearing this, he smiled and said, Father, why don't I go? You are so big, you must not be happy to go to my aunt. Thinking you are taking pity on them, I think it's better for me to go. Well, anyway, Zishan is not far from our home, I walked quickly, and I turned over in half an hour. Mushi never worried about his daughter going into the mountains. His daughter's strength is stronger than him, and her survival skills in the mountains are better than his. Mushi can only classify these as talents, otherwise he really can't understand why a 9-year-old child know how to guard against poisonous snakes, insects, and ants in the mountains and identify directions in dense forests. Boss, how do you sell these rabbits? Asked a little daughter-in-law with a basket on her shoulders. When Mushi saw that there was a business coming, he hurriedly got up and said with a smile, this rabbit is 20 cents a catty. The little daughter-in-law frowned in disgust. This rabbit won't die for a long time, will it? Is it worth 20 wen? Mushi patted his chest and said, it was all shot this morning. Don't worry, I am well known in this area, and I never sell wild animals that have been overnight. The little daughter-in-law raised her eyebrows and looked at him with a smile. What about the rest? Mu Yangling rolled his eyes in his heart, thinking that the other party's winking eyes were for nothing, and sure enough, Mushi replied solemnly, our family will dry it and keep it for rations, and never sell it out. The little daughter-in-law hesitated, and Mu Yangling smiled and said, sister-in-law, my wild animals are the freshest on this street. Otherwise, if you ask around, they will all be delivered on the same day, and my wild animals it's the cheapest on the street. The little daughter-in-law saw that she was called a little sister-in-law by a child, and she was very happy. She thought that she could buy it anywhere. This one looked really good, so she pointed to one of the rabbits and said, then I want this one, the boss will give it to you. I call it. Okay, Mushi quickly said, 3 catties and 9 tails, I count you 3.5 catties, as long as you give 70 wen. The little daughter-in-law carefully counted out 70 coins from the purse to Mu Yangling, smiled slightly, and said, if your rabbit is delicious, I will buy it again next time, but let my husband taste it. Then I won't obey. Mushi patted his chest and promised, don't worry, our family often sets up a stall on the street to sell wild animals. If you feel that it's not fresh after eating tonight, just come to me tomorrow. Only then did the little daughter-in-law leave contentedly. Mu Yangling stared at the 70 coins in his palm, and said in a low voice, Father, I beat this rabbit. Mushi smiled heartily, okay, you can take this money and buy candy for you and your brother later. Mu Yangling pouted, I don't like candy, I'd better save some millet for my mother and younger brother Shu Wanyang's spleen and stomach are a little bad, and her younger brother Mu Bowen's body is also a little weak, so he should eat some millet often nourishing the stomach. Mushi was very pleased to see his daughter so sensible and considerate. Mushi often sells wild things here, so there are many regular customers. After a while, the remaining wild things were bought up. Mu Yangling happily counted the copper coins and said to Mushi, Father, we made $5. 138 coins, we'll go buy some pork ribs and stew them for mother later. Okay, I'll buy another catty of pork belly for you to eat. Mu Yangling suddenly smiled like a flower, showing a small dimple on the left, which made Mushi feel better. Mushi took his daughter to buy pork, and Mu Yangling couldn't help swallowing. Although there was never a shortage of meat at home, wild ones were never as rich as domestic ones. In this era, except for those wealthy families who are tired of eating chicken, duck, and fish, I like wild animals more than domestic animals. Generally, people prefer to eat domestic animals because they are full of fat. Mu Yangling also prefers to eat home-raised pork and chicken now, because there is plenty of oil and water. Butcher Chang and Mushi in the town are also acquaintances. Usually, when Mushi has no time to set up a stall, he sells wild animals to Butcher Chang, who then resells them. When the butcher saw Mushi, he smiled and said, Old Mu, I heard that you made a lot of money, there are no secrets in the town, so Mushi just came out of Piaoxianglu, and the news that he made 8 liang of silver spread everywhere. It's all over. Mushi was helpless, there will be nothing left after paying the tax later. Butcher Chang also felt a little sad, that's right, this year's tax is too heavy. Mu Yangling probed to look at the pork on his chopping board, and said, Uncle Chang, bring a catty of pork belly and a spare rib to my house. The crisp voice broke the dull atmosphere. Butcher Chang grinned, okay, my lady is waiting, Uncle Chang will cut it for you right now. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 8. Chang Butcher's knife was very accurate, with one cut, there was no more and no less than a pound of pork belly. He took the ribs, threaded them with a rope and handed them to Mu Yangling. Mu Yangling looked up at his father, Mushi looked at her with a smile, and Mu Yangling smiled and took out a copper plate from his arms to give to Butcher Chang. Butcher Chang smiled and said, okay, now the little lady can be in charge of the house, and Lao Mu gave birth to a good girl. Mushi and Uranjian straightened their chests, waved to Chang Tuhu and went to the grain shop. The price of food has risen again. Mushi frowned, feeling a little uneasy in his heart. After thinking for a while, he said to the boss, I want 20 caddies of millet, 2 stones of rice, 60 caddies of white flour and 60 caddies of black flour. The boss frowned slightly, and looked at Mushi in surprise. Mushi rubbed his head embarrassedly and smiled, my family doesn't grow food, and it all depends on buying it from outside. If I make some money today, I will buy more and eat more. Seeing Mushi's simple and honest appearance, the boss nodded and said to the child, go get a bag and put it on Master Mu. A stone of rice weighs 120 caddies. Except for millet, rice plus flour is only 360 caddies. Mushi and Mu Yangling have a large appetite, and this amount of food is enough for their family not to go hungry for 3 months. But these costs are quite a lot, even though Mushi has chosen rice and white noodles with moderate prices. Medium-sized rice costs 1 or 2 or 3 renminbi per stone, but before it was only 1 or 2 renminbi. You must know that it is now the autumn harvest, and it was only 1 or 2 renminbi when it was green and yellow, but now it has increased by 1 renminbi. Think more. Medium-sized white noodles cost 12 wen a caddy, black noodles cost 9 wen a caddy, and millet is the most expensive at 18 wen a caddy, all of which have increased in price. Mu Yangling usually pays attention to grain prices, but now he can't help but calm down, knowing that something is wrong. The waiter at the grain shop packed things for them, and the boss made some calculations, and Mu Yangling had already figured it out in his mind. A total of 4.20 cents, the owner of the grain shop and Mu Yangling said in unison. The owner of the grain shop looked at Mu Yangling in surprise. At this time, there are very few people who can calculate accounts, and even fewer people can do mental calculations so quickly. Mu Shi took out silver to pay, but the 2 coins and 20 coins were copper coins from Mu Yangling. In this way, the money he earned today would only be 4 or 283 coins left. Going to the 50 cash tax paid in the market today, there are only 4 taels and 33 cash left. Not to mention Mu Yangling, even Mu Shi couldn't help being a little frustrated. Besides, Mu Shi still wanted to buy more food just in case. Mu Shi didn't let his daughter carry the food out. He was very careful not to let her show her strength among people other than the villagers. After putting all the things he bought on the trolley and tying them up, Mu Shi said to his silent daughter, "Get in the trolley quickly, Dad will push you back." Mu Yangling hurriedly climbed onto the trolley, turned his back to his father, and said in a loud voice, "Father, I'm ready, let's go." "Okay, let's go now." The trolley started steadily. Mu Yangling tilted his head to look at the stalls on both sides, with some worry in his eyes. This is a border gate, and food is not only affected by natural disasters and seasons, but also affected by wars. She doesn't know about other places, but according to the old people in the village, this year's grain harvest can be regarded as a bumper harvest. The wheat and rice in the field are gradually ripening, and the village is slowly starting to harvest. It is said that the grain price at this time should be slow. It's a slow decline, but at this time the price of food is rising. Mu Yangling was in a bad mood, but she didn't want to affect Mu Shi, so she could only turn her back to him, trying to pretend that she was happy and relaxed. Mu Shi was not as worried as Mu Yangling. After all, he had experienced a lot. Although he was worried, he looked away after a while, and the boat went straight to the bridge. Xu Wanyang stood in front of the door waiting for them to come back, while Xiao Bowen squatted aside and played by himself. When he saw his father pushing his sister back, he immediately threw away the stone in his hand and ran over. Mu Shi stopped the trolley, and Mu Yangling jumped down, picked up his younger brother and put him on the trolley, smiling, "Sit back for you." Xiao Bowen was a little out of breath when he ran all the way down, and he didn't resist when he was carried by his sister to the cart with one hand. Instead, he grabbed the grain bag with great interest, and shouted with sparkling eyes, "Go on, go on." Seeing that his son was happy and happy in his heart, Mu Shi quickened his pace. Xiao Bowen yelled, "Oh, oh," and the family arrived at the door after a while. Xu Wanyang looked at them with crooked eyebrows, and waved to Xiao Bowen, "Come down quickly, don't tire your father." Mu Yangling lifted his younger brother down, turned around and said with a smile, "Don't worry, mother, it only weighs a few hundred caddies, so father will definitely not be tired." Mu Shi nodded again and again, "It's okay to add a few hundred caddies." Xu Wanyang wiped his sweat with a handkerchief, and said softly, "I know you are strong, but it's a hot day, walking on the road empty-handed is suffering. Why don't you wait for the sun to go down before coming back?" Mu Shi smiled innocently and said, "Aren't I worried that you and your son are at home?" Mu Shi looked at Xu Wanyang's stomach. "It's been 7 months, so be careful." Xu Wanyang pursed her lips and smiled, "Don't worry, I only walk around the house and don't do heavy work, so what can happen?" Seeing his parents showing affection there, Mu Yangling walked into the house with a bag of rice in one hand. Xiao Bowen looked at his sister who was almost submerged in the grain bag, and then at his mother who was still wiping his father's sweat, and walked quickly. The short legs followed her sister. Mu Yangling put the rice on the ground. When he saw his younger brother, he took out a piece of candy from his pocket and stuffed it in his hand. "This is what my sister bought for you. Eat it quickly." Little Bowen's eyes sparkled. "Where's my sister's?" Mu Yangling wrinkled his nose and said, "I don't like candy, so you should eat it." But Xiao Bowen felt that there is no one in this world who doesn't like candy. "If my sister doesn't eat it, I must give it to him," so Xiao Bowen unwrapped the candy wrapper very friendly, took a sip, and put it to my sister's mouth, saying, "Sister, you eat quickly, you take a bite, and I take a bite." Mu Yangling looked at the saliva in the small blog post above, but couldn't stop, shook his head and waved his hands and said, "I don't eat sugar. I heard that eating too much sugar will damage my teeth, so I don't eat it." "You can eat it?" Xiao Bowen nodded clearly and said, "By the way, my sister's teeth fell out. Is it because I ate too much sugar?" Xiao Bowen hesitated. "Then if I eat sugar, will I lose my teeth like my sister?" Mu Yangling reiterated solemnly, "I didn't lose my teeth because I ate candy, but because I grew up. When you grow up, you will lose your teeth too." Little Bowen looked at his sister in horror. Mu Yangling turned around and went out to continue carrying the remaining grain. Facing the candy in his hand alone, Xiao Bowen said to himself, "Since I will lose my teeth when I grow up, I should eat more. Anyway, my teeth will fall out." Mu Yangling, who had already walked out of the room, just heard. Mu Yangling moved all the things back to the room. Xu Wanyang had already gone into the kitchen to prepare food for their father and daughter. Mu Shi stood outside the kitchen and said, "Let me do it, your stomach is getting bigger and bigger." Xu Wanyang laughed and said, "My 7-month-old stomach is still on the ground. I just went into the kitchen. You can go into the main room and sit down. I'll be fine soon." Mu Yangling and Xiao Bowen nodded again and again. "Yes, Dad, you go into the house quickly, and let mother cook." Mu Shi patted them on the head. "Don't you just dislike the bad food made by your father? It's good to eat some, and your father and I are not bad at cooking." "It's not bad, but compared with my mother's, it's a sky and a ground." Mu Yangling and Xiao Bowen slandered. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 9. In the end, it was Xu Wanyang's cooking. She was no longer Miss Chiao 10 years ago. Her husband held her in his hands, but she couldn't always make her husband difficult and hard, while she lived in her own world. Mu Shi took out all the money in the family and counted it. There were more than 7 taels of money in total. He put the copper coins that were less than a penny aside. He sat cross-legged on the kong, staring at the 7 taels of money in a daze. Xu Wanyang came in with her stomach in her arms and asked, "Isn't the tax only 6 taels? Our family has enough, what else do you worry about?" Mu Shi frowned. "The price of grain at the grain shop in the town has increased, and I'm afraid the border is unstable." Mu Shi looked at Xu Wanyang's big belly and felt flustered. He was a little irritable and said, "How about we go south to hide?" "How is this possible?" Xu Wanyang was shocked. "Master, it will be difficult to come back after leaving the homeland, not to mention that everything needs money to go out. What can we do with our current 1 or 2 taels of silver?" How could Mu Shi not know? The wife is heavy, and the son is not in good health. If they flee south, they must have a donkey cart, but now their family has nothing but a cart. Even if you can use your own food when you are away from home, what about the food? There is also accommodation, and even the cost of entering the city. All these items require money. My wife's belly is 7 months old, and I am most afraid of bumps. But Mushi is flustered. This is a kind of vigilance only in the face of danger. He has never made a mistake. Mushi's mouth was a little parched. He poured himself a bowl of water, touched his wife's sharp belly, gritted his teeth and said, "Then let's stock up more food. If something happens, we'll run to the mountains." Xu Huanyang lowered her eyes, "But there are ferocious beasts in the mountains. What's more, our family only has a tael of silver left after paying taxes. How much food can we buy?" Mushi was immediately discouraged. His wife also needed to prepare a sum of money for childbirth. Last time when she gave birth to a son, it was very dangerous and she couldn't spend all the money in the family. Xu Huanyang showed a smile, patted his hand, and said softly, "Pay the tax first. There must be a way for the car to reach the mountain. It's a big deal, we will just follow the people in the village." "But your body?" "My health is not as bad as you think," Xu Huanyang said with a smile. "I think it's not bad. With you protecting our mothers, we will live a better life than others." Xu Huanyang is not very worried. It was forced out. 10 years ago, she would never have imagined that she would be able to cook, sell as a female celebrity, or even grow vegetables in the fields, and wash clothes by the river. At that time, thinking about it, she felt that such a life would be better than death. But when the real thing happened, I felt that there was nothing wrong with this kind of life. I was tired physically, but satisfied mentally. After I got used to all this, I didn't even feel tired. Now I feel that fleeing is very painful, but when it really comes, it shouldn't be difficult to accept it. Xu Huanyang has always been lenient. Mushi has always been nervous about his wife's affairs, but he is not so optimistic, so he plans in his heart to go to the county town tomorrow to sell all the family's fur goods, and leave more money at home for emergency. Mu Bowen was holding a copy of the 3-character classic under the tree, shaking his head and reading, while Mu Yangling was sitting in front of the door listening to his parents' conversation in a daze. What's the quickest way to make money? Mu Yangling pondered with his knowledge and experience from his previous lives, and came to the conclusion that the fastest way to get rich is to rob. Mu Yangling twitched the corner of his mouth, threw away the thought, and sighed, leaving this profound question to his father to worry about. Just now, she carefully counted the things she was good at with her fingers, and found that there was nothing except fighting. As for the various mechanical knowledge and knowledge about war that she learned in college, this has nothing to do with making money. Not only has nothing to do with it, it can be said that the things she learned are not very useful in this era. Mechanical manufacturing is based on fine steel forging and various sophisticated machines. As for war, she has learned modern information warfare models. Give her a radio, and she may be able to modify the monitoring and communication function, but in what's the use now? Guns and ammunition, given her time to explore, she might be able to make them, but making hot weapons in the era of cold weapons is undoubtedly a devastating blow to the people of this world, and she is not so frantic yet. So, to sum up, she is useless except for fighting and hunting. When cooking, there is only one dish of stir-fried vegetables and scrambled eggs, or stir-fry, with only oil and salt. Mu Yangling was ashamed, and felt that she had lived ashamed all her life, and she couldn't do anything for her family. Just as Mu Yangling was feeling ashamed, Mu Bowen called out uncle obediently. When Mu Yangling came back to his senses, he saw Lu Daqian standing at the door, hesitating. Lu Daqian and Mu Yangling's eyes met, they smiled awkwardly, and said, "Aling, where are your parents?" Mu Yangling hurriedly welcomed him in. "Uncle, my parents are in the house, come in quickly." Mu Shi and Xu Huanyang in the room hurriedly put away the money when they heard the voice. Mu Shi handed the things to Xu Huanyang and said, "I'll go out to meet you." Xu Huanyang nodded. Lu Daqian is Mu Shi's biological uncle, so Mu Shi respectfully invited Lu Daqian into the house, and Xu Huanyang poured him a bowl of tea. Ludakian went to the Three Treasures Hall for nothing. He took a look at the furnishings in the Mew family's house, and saw that it was still the same as when his sister was alive. He didn't even buy a few tables and chairs. He sighed slightly, and he also knew that this nephew's life not so good, although earning more, but also spending more. Married a young lady, pampered and spoiled, the eldest daughter is not bad, but the son is a medicine jar, and he has to take medicine and see a doctor every day, but it is much better than their family. Ludakian clenched his hands tightly, and it was difficult to open his mouth. Mushi said, "Uncle, if you need anything, just tell me, and I will help you if you can." Ludakian didn't come to their house very often, and whenever he had anything to do, he would call his grandson and call Mushi to Lu. Everyone said that during the Chinese New Year holidays, they just asked the children below to come over to give gifts and return gifts. The last time I came was because Bowen was born, and he had successors. Ludakian let out a sigh of relief, slumped his shoulders and said, "Shitu, are your family's taxes and money ready?" "Yes, a wild boar fell into the trap this morning, so it was prepared." Ludakian took a puff of dry cigarette, his face was slightly red, but he still said, "Your cousin's tax money hasn't been settled yet, and I know it's difficult for you. Uncle came here just to ask, if you have money here just help them." Ludakian had never begged his nephew very much, so it was extremely difficult to speak to his nephew. Mushi was a little surprised. "Uncle, don't your family pay food? Why do you have to pay taxes?" Ludakian sighed, and said sadly, "This is not tax money, it is food money. In the past, food money was also food that can be paid, but this year the grain price has dropped by 10%, and the food money is also required to be paid in silver. Today early in the morning, your cousin went to Yuan Weilang's house to inquire, and the price of the food was only 4 renminbi and 8 cents a stone, which was nearly a penny less than last year, and we were reluctant to sell it cheaply." Mushi jumped up in shock. "Why are there so few? I went to the town to buy rice today, and the rice would cost 1, 2, or 3 coins. The Reborn Wife is Farming." Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 10. 1 stone of grain can produce at least 70 caddies of rice. Even if it is the worst, there must be 60 caddies for half a stone, right? According to the worst case scenario, 8 cents, 41 cents, and 6 cents can buy 1 shi of rice. Even if the merchant wants to make money, 1 tael of silver is the most according to common sense. In previous years, during the autumn harvest, zongmai was worth 1 tael of silver and 1 stone. Both Mushi and Ludakian were downcast, and Ludakian asked with a sullen face, "The Chinese rice you bought yesterday was really worth 1, 2, or $3? Mushi nodded. Ludakian's hands trembled slightly. "Here, this utterly unconscionable person has almost doubled his income." Mushi also lowered his eyes and remained silent. The grain shops in the town and county are all run by wealthy households, and the 3 Yuan Weilang from the town are among them. Mushi said, "I was thinking about going to the county town tomorrow to sell the leather goods and store some food." "Don't buy it," Ludakian said angrily, "every household in the village has food, so you can buy it in the town and county. It's cheaper for those bastards." Mushi fell silent. He was afraid that the border would change due to the increase in food prices before, so he wanted to go south, but now the price of food on the uncle's side has been pushed down, and this year's tax has risen again. Apparently someone maliciously raised the price of rice in the counties and towns and lowered the price of grain in the countryside. What Mushi could think of, Ludakian naturally thought of it, but he couldn't do anything about it. This year's food money must be silver, and the only thing that rural people can exchange for money is grain. Those people must have colluded to lower the price of grain, so the price is the same no matter who you sell it to. Seeing Ludakian's sad face, Mushi thought for a while, then went into the house and took a tael or 2 of silver and came out. "Uncle, my family only has so much money left after paying the taxes, so let's treat it as if I bought it from you. Food. Ludakian clenched the money in his hand, sighed and said, I'll ask your two brothers to bring you the food later, it's all this year's new food. Mushi hurriedly said, the price is the same as the grain price at this time last year. The price of grain at this time last year was about 4 cents and 95 cents. Ludakian nodded in response, got up and said, my family has all the money, but so many people in the village are still kept in the dark. I'll go and discuss with some old guys in the village to see if there is any way. It can't be like this if you are so confused, let someone figure it out. Ludakian walked away with his hands behind his back. Mu Yangling was cleaning the yard, and when he saw it, he yelled, go slowly, uncle. Ludakian nodded slightly, Ling, your cousin Lang picked up 2 rotten books, you go back to my house to have a look, if they are useful, you can take them back for your younger brother, they don't know a single character, keep them, it's no use either. Mu Yangling happily responded, I'll go when the sun goes down. Ludakian's eldest grandson, Lu Lang, likes to play around the streets and alleys. He often picks up some things at home, and sends them home as long as they are pieces of paper. Because only the Mu family can read and write in the entire Guashan village, to be precise, only Shu Wanyang can read. Both Mu Shi and Mu Yangling followed Shu Wanyang to learn how to read. It is also because Shu Wanyang is literate. Although Shu Wanyang is not very good at working and has no gossip, literacy is too high in this era. Mu Yangling watched Ludakian go away, then ran back to the house, and asked anxiously, Father, shall we still collect food? Tun, why not? Let's buy it directly from the folks. We don't have to go to the town or the county. We can save a lot of money. Then we can send it to the mill in the town to grind it into rice. Shu Wanyang sighed, it's so easy to have a bumper harvest. I thought that everyone's life would be easier, but who knew that the price was deliberately lowered? The low price of the grain hurts the farmers. Mu Shi scratched his head, but there was nothing he could do. Father, the local gentry are the only ones who lower the price. Wouldn't it be over if we sell the grain to passing merchants? At least we can raise the price a little bit. Shu Wanyang shook her head and laughed, it's not as simple as you think. Mu Shi also said, now it's the autumn harvest, and there are more or less grains everywhere. The price of grains has dropped, and the distance is far away. Who has nothing to go to the border to transport grains? Well, we adults want to if there is no good way, you, a child, don't get involved. Despised. Mu Yangling was very angry. Although she looked like a child on the outside, she was an adult on the inside, an adult. She said that she must find a way, otherwise she would have lived in vain for so many years. Mu Shi didn't know what his daughter was thinking. Seeing her eyes widen, he said, this is the business of adults. You have been busy for a long time today. Now go play with your brother and watch him a little bit. Tell him to go out in the sun for too long. Seeing that Mu Shi turned around to go to the warehouse, Mu Yangling asked curiously, Father, why are you going to the warehouse? I'm going to tidy up the leather goods, and I'll go to the county to sell them tomorrow. Your mother is about to give birth, and the family needs to keep money. Mu Shi felt sorry for his daughter who had been tired for a long time, and said, go and play quickly, if you don't want to play, just go to the house and lie down for a while. Father will get up early tomorrow, and probably won't be back until midnight, so don't go to the mountains tomorrow, and take care of your mother and younger brother at home. Mu Yangling rolled his eyes, responded, and ran out to find his brother. Xiao Bowen was obediently shaking his head and reciting the 3-character classic. Mu Yangling ran forward and pulled the book in his hand, saying, stop memorizing, go play with my sister. Xiao Bowen struggled for a while, and said, but my mother told me to memorize the 5th page before I can go out to play. You've been memorizing it for so long, and you won't be able to memorize it any longer. Why don't you go play with me for a while and memorize it when you come back in the evening? I'll cook for you in the evening, and you just memorize it. Only then did Xiao Bowen show a happy smile, and nodded obediently. Then sister, where shall we go to play? Go to cousin Lang's house first. He picked up 2 books with words. Let's go and see what kind of books they are and whether they can be used. Then I will take you to Gauden and the others to play with. Gauden is the only son of Widow Lu, the head of the village. Like Xiao Bowen, he is only 5 years old. He is the king of the 5 and 6-year-old children in the village, and Xiao Bowen often plays with them. Xiao Bowen happily took the book back and put it away, ran out and held his sister's hand, bouncing towards cousin Lang's house. Most of Linchin village's surnames are Lu, and there are also Ma surnames Hu and Zhang. They are the only family with the Mu surname, so as long as the Mu family in Linchin village is mentioned, everyone knows that they are referring to their family. The Mu family lives at the foot of the mountain. There are 5 large tile-roofed houses made of green bricks, which are the only ones in the village. They were built by Mu Yangling's grandfather before he married his grandmother. A quarter of an hour's walk to the southeast is the most densely populated area in the village, and the uncle's family is among them. Uncle Lu Dakian had 3 sons and 2 daughters in total, but in the end only 2 sons survived. The second child died of illness when he was only 3 years old, and the 2 daughters died in a military disaster 12 years ago. However, Mu Yangling's grandparents also died in that military disaster. So the uncle is now living with his 2 sons, and the family is not separated. Because it was busy autumn, the adults were rushing to harvest in the fields, and there were not many people in the village. When the siblings walked over, they didn't meet anyone. Children over 6 years old were probably thrown to work in the fields. The eldest cousin Lu Lang was holding his 8-year-old brother Lu Lun in the basin to take a bath. While washing, he scolded, "I told you to be disobedient. Wait until dad comes back to see if he beats you." Mu Yangling opened the door and came in, blinked at the 2 people in the yard, and asked, "Cousin Lang, Cousin Lun, what are you doing?" Lu Lun uttered an "ah," pulled off the clothes on the stool and covered his chest, shouting, "Don't look, turn around, turn around. Brother, drive her out." Lu Lang stared blankly at his younger brother, then suddenly jumped up and stopped in front of his younger brother, shouting, "Cousin, cousin, you go out first, and then come in after Alan has finished dressing." Xiao doubting, who is only 8 years old, who cares? Mu Yangling rolled his eyes, took the sluggish brother out, and closed the door by the way. Lu Lun jumped out of the basin and began to get dressed in a hurry. His eyes were red and he was about to cry. She saw it, she must have seen it. "Why didn't you close the door just now?" Lu Lang argued, "I didn't know that someone would come. Isn't everyone in the field at this time?" Lu Lun wiped away tears aggrievedly. Lu Lang hurriedly said, "Don't be sad, she definitely didn't see it. You were sitting in the basin at that time, and you moved so fast." "She really didn't see it?" "No, definitely not," Lu Lang said affirmatively.